We'll do a review on Lekutei Sichas in Chelek Chof Vov, volume 26. This is the first Sicha for the portion of Tetzaveh, and we're going to study this Elilu Nishmas, our son Levi Yitzchok, who passed away, suddenly dedicated Shliach of the Rebbe, successful Shliach, and we're learning this to benefit B'toich Shloshim, to benefit his soul. This is a Rashi Sicha in which the Rebbe basically discusses the differences of the shape of the ephod, the way Rashi has the shape and the way it is in the Rambam. There's some changes, small changes, and the reason for that, the Rebbe explains, because there's two ways to look at the begodim, whether they're mainly garments, but they're also tachshitim, they're also adornments, or they're mainly adornments, which are also garments. And that would be the difference between the Rashi's view that it's garments mainly, and that's why Rashi changes some things. And it's also will explain some other things why the Rashi says that this is something that he imagines, and the Rebbe brings out later on that Rashi once saw a Sorah, a woman who was wearing the sinner that gave him, and the reason for seeing that was in order for him to write the Rashi, to explain the Rashi, as we'll see later on. The Sicha will go step by step. Tetzaveh Aleph. Benegeya dem tziur fun dem ephod, as far as the shape of the ephod, that's the garment of the Kohen Gadol, the Choshen and the ephod, is Shitas Rashi b'Pirushei al HaTorah b'derech klal. So Rashi's opinion, view, in his commentary on the Torah, generally speaking, is Behesem Midas Rambam b'Sifrei Hayad. Fits and goes along as the Rambam writes in the Sifrei Hayad. What does the Rambam write in the Sefer Hayad as? The width of the ephod is the width of a human from shoulder to shoulder. That's the ephod. That's the width of the ephod. What is the length of the ephod? That's opposite the elbows of the hands at the back, starting from the elbows of the hand, ad raglayim, until the feet. Now, the Rebbe in the notes here brings down already that there's different versions, but we'll just do the Sikh itself within the Rambam. There's various different versions, exactly the Lashon of the Rambam. So yet, says the Kesef Mishnah, that Afal Pikein is oberdo aktsas shinoi. The words of the Kesef Mishnah, a little change. Zwischen Divrei Rashi and Divrei Rambam in them, between what Rashi says and the words of the Rambam in this. So the Kesef Mishnah says that there's a katsas shinoi, there's a little change. And this is the change that the Rebbe is going to address over here, that Rashi says differently than what the Rambam says. So first is b'midas rochboi. The first thing is in the measure of the width. Was it from shoulder to shoulder, as the Rambam said, or it was even wider, that it wrapped around in the front a little bit? Rashi zogt, because b'midas rochboi, when we talk about the measure of the width, about the ephod, so Rashi says, ki midas reichav gabi shalodom v'yoser, like the measure of the width of the back of a person, and a little more and more. And Rashi says, "V'nikpal hasinar mikal lifnei hakoyin al mosnov," that the sinner, that's the ephod, has been folded over in front of the kohen al mosnov, on his hips, uktsas kreisei, on his hips, and some of his stomach mikan mikan. So both sides overlapped, and they made that turn, not only in the back, but they made the turn so that they covered part of the hips and part of the stomach. So that's Rashi's view, that it's wider than just the back. The Rambam zok, but the Rambam, on the other hand, what does he say? We just quoted before, that the width of the aphid was like the width of the back of the person from shoulder to shoulder, nothing extra. Was mashma the understanding is nitmer, not more than just from shoulder to shoulder, not to wrap around like Rashi says. So that's as far as the measure of the width. As far as the length goes, we made this archive. Makes a difference also where does this start and how far down it goes. So from Rashi, it comes out that it's below the elbows and it goes all the ways down to the heels. And from the Rambam, it's mashma that it starts at the elbows and it just goes down to the legs, not all the ways down to the heels. B'midas orkoi, Rashi says, "V'choiger oisei," that you gird it keneged liboy lamatomatzile, lamatomatzilo. You opposite your heart, but it is below your elbows. Un magia, and then further, how far does it come? Adakevim goes all the way to the heels, so it's below the elbows, and it starts and it goes all the way down to the heels. The Rambam zok, but the Rambam says, opposite the elbows, not lower, but opposite, when as the length nor adraglaim, it only reaches to the legs, but it doesn't go down all the ways to the heels, as Rashi says. So we have basically three changes. The width, according to Rashi, it's wider. According to the length, according to the Rambam, it starts from the elbows and goes down to the legs, to the feet. According to Rashi, it starts below the elbows and it goes all the way to the heels. So the Rebbe says, as Didrai, we can say that Didrai Shinuyim seine verbunden, that these three changes are connected, they're tied, mit Achille Kloli, zwischen Rashi and Rambam, in a general distinction, a difference between Rashi and the Rambam in defining the aphid, okay, the Lakamon, as the Rebbe will explain later on. The Rebbe will explain this, that what is the main function of the aphid as a tachshit, as a beged, as we'll see later on. But the Rebbe brings down a Rashi that explains the aphid, and Rashi starts off that he doesn't really know, he doesn't have any sources, but Libi Eimerli, and later on he does bring sources. So the Rebbe wants to know there are sources for it, because the Rashi himself brings sources. And the Rambam seemingly has sources for this, because the Rambam and the Rashi almost say the same thing. Why is it that Rashi says he doesn't have any sources and the Rambam brings this down without just saying that? It seems to me, which means that he does have a source for it. So what's going on over there? What part is there sources, not sources? Let's look inside. Base. First to explain Rashi's words, when Rashi talks about the act of the Eishvid. Rashi hyped on Pirushay. Rashi begins his commentary. Ve'eifed lo shamati v'lo motzosi bebraisa pirush tavnisei. I haven't heard, the Rashi says, about the ephod. I haven't heard, and I didn't find in a braisa the interpretation of what it looked like. The tavnisei, the shape, what was the ephod, didn't see. And then Rashi continues, v'liba emerli. This is, my heart tells me, in other words, I guess that this it is. That this is girded to him, to the kohen, from his back. Gab ish. Its width is like the width of a back of a person. Sinar shekoidin purtzin. It's like a sinner, which is a shekoidin purtzin. Shekoidin hasoris ksherich al hasusim. The soris, the officer, women officers, when they ride the horses, they put a sign on their back, kind of an apron kind of a thing, a sinner, an apron. Kach maseu chulu, and Rashi continues to say what it is. When his mamshach the pratim that we said before. So Rashi basically starts off, he doesn't know, and he says this is like the act, the way it works, that he thinks, he imagines, libya imrli. So if the Rambam has basically the same interpretation as Rashi, and the Rambam doesn't say Yirali, it seems like there's a source for that. Why does Rashi say he doesn't have a source? And Rashi himself brings down sources. Not verstehen. Mezedoch kinal, we see, as I said before, as a chutza ketzas shinui, that besides a little of a change is bitziyure from the Eifed das Rambam as if das Rashi, is the shape of the Eifed, the view of the Rambam is just like das Rashi. Underfun was the Rambam zoknit of them, and the fact that the Rambam doesn't say about this, oh, I imagine the Yirali creates with the Rambam. A lot of times when he doesn't have a very direct source to explain, says V'yirali. He doesn't say V'yirali. He just explains that this is the Eifes, Kiyetzbe, Kidarkoi. That would be the normal way. V'er zok halacha Kiyetzbe, v'achan arot nit kimoker, when he says halacha or similar on something he has no source. And the Rambam doesn't do it here, is move on. Azer hot amokar if them tziyuru mida. So it's understood that the Rambam has a source for this picture and this measurement of the Ephod. He does have. So if the Rambam has, why can't Rashi have that same? Rashi zok, as opposed to Rashi says, believe me, my heart tells me. Doesn't bring up what's meant as Edis dos mechadish midas asma b'limoker. That means that he is coming up with this idea. It's his novelty on his own, from his own mind, without any source. But if the Rambam had a source and says the same thing, why couldn't Rashi have the same source? You say to Mizu. More than that. What is Taka the source of the Rambam? The Das Mefarsha Rambam, according to those who explain the Rambam, is Mekoire from Pashtus Aksubim. Rashi's source is from the simple meaning of the verses, which is Darkavi Yisayt Pirushim of Rashi from Rashi al Torah. This is the path and the basis of Rashi's commentary on the Torah. Rashi always goes by the Pshat. So, if the source for the Rambam is the Pshat of the Psukim, why doesn't Rashi accept it as a source? And he says, Libi Oimerli, that he doesn't know. Now, maybe the Rebbe says the Rambam had a different version in the Braise and he saw it, Rashi didn't see it. That's a Deiche Godel. Avshe B'Deiche Godel Yesh Loimar. Although, with the great Deichek, it's very difficult to say. We can say the Rambam Gehad the Reif Amoker B'Droshes Razal. The Rambam had a source in the expounding of our sages of blessed memory, which means in Zayin Nusach B'Braise, the Melechas HaMishkan HaKiyetzebay, in his version in the Braise, where it discusses the act of the Mishkan, the work of the Mishkan, maybe the Rambam had the description of the Ephod and Rashi didn't have it, was given by Rashi, that wasn't by Rashi. But that's difficult. Have to find another reason what's going on over here. And besides that, the Rebbe says, Rashi himself brings down Psukim. Nochme. Rashi Gufeis Mamshech B'Perushe who bring Terayis from Psukim. Rashi himself continues this commentary, brings evidence from different verses, Lachriach, Kama Protim from Pirush Tavnise, to proof, to force out the ideas of the details of his interpretation of the image of the Ephod. Nemar, he says, it says in the pasuk, the David Chogur Ephod Bud, that David was girded with a linen apron, an Ephod Bud. Lamadnu, so when they will learn, Sheha Ephod Chaguru, that the Ephod is girded, is a belt. Rashi says that we can't say maybe the entire ephod consists of a belt, Shari Nemar, because the pasuk says Vayiten Olav as ephod. You placed on it, on the choshen, he placed the ephod, and then it says Vayachgar he girded it with the belt of the ephod. So there's a ephod and there's a belt. So the ephod itself is not the belt. You can't say that because of the steak sefer. we're going to Shari Nemar because the pasuk says. So since in the pasuk it says "Shtei kisvos ha'ephod," so that means that the ephod had shoulder pads to it, but that's not the uh, ephod itself is not the kisvos. Lamadnu. So this all teaches us Sha'ephod Shem Levad. The ephod is its own name. Maksefis Shem Levad. This is also all from Rashi, and the shoulders is a name by itself. V'acheshev Shem Levad, and the belt is its own name. So basically, the ephod is something different than the kisvos than the chagoris. Rashi says all this. Void and more. Ufizeh. So now Rashi has mekoyre bekama dike Sachen is from psukim, since that the source from many main items are verses. He quotes the psukim. Isn't it glatik? So it's not so smooth. But says zoktiv them libe omerli. So why does Rashi say libe omerli? But he has psukim for that. So why does he say libe omerli? So the Rebbe will now explain. Based on another question, that when the Torah says Eila begodim and it counts the begodim, it doesn't count tzitz over there. And the question is, we count all the begodim without counting the bagged of tzitz from the big dekuna gedola. But man as first gimel, but man as verstehen bahagdi makushi in the psukim will understand it by introducing the question in the verses was andere beforshim, from Pashtona Mikra Bavorene. Other commentators, those who learned the simple meaning of the pasuk, they bring out this problem. Mashenki Pirish Rashi in pasuk, Rashi as opposed to Rashi doesn't address it. In pasuk Rechanter, in pasuk accounts, these are the garments that you make. This is for the Kohen God. It says Choshen ve'ephod, umeil, uksoines tashbetz, mitznefes, ve'adne. That's 7 garments. Wer the Shaila, warum steht nicht die andere Big Dekuna? Why doesn't it say also the other Big Dekuna, which is Tzitzu Mechnasai? Actually, the pasuk says only 6. I said 7. It doesn't bring down. Michnasayim and tzitz are not mentioned here. Now, Michnasayim, the Rebbe brings in a parentheses over here, because Michnasayim were basically made for tznius, for them to wear. It may have a totally different status. It's not Bechlal, as the Rebbe discusses in the Ha'or over here. But the question is about the tzitz. How come they don't count the tzitz? So Mela, we don't count the Mechnasayim, but why not the tzitz? And the question is, how come Rashi doesn't address it? This is a question in the simple meaning of the pasuk. And we don't find that Rashi should answer this or caution us about this issue. Why is there no mention of the tzitz? And the Rebbe says that this is really answered in the Rashi on Kosher. The question why we're not counting, this is answered by Pirush Rashi of Kosher on Kosher. But Rashi translates the Kosher is Tachshit, but it says Keneged Halev. Tachshit, Keneged Halev. The word Keneged Halev tells Rashi's trying to tell us that this was at least in a spot where the lev, where you were clothing, opposite by the heart, you were clothing. And because the Choshen was a Tachshit Keneged Halev, that's why we call it part of the Big Dekuna when it says Big Dekuna. As opposed to the Tzitz, the Rebbe will explain, that's just made on the forehead. There's no place. It's not a place where you have. So therefore, there's no reason to count it among the big Kuna. It's not really a beged. As the Rebbe explains that there's two parts here, the beged and the tachshit part. But according to Rashi, it has to be also somewhat of a beged in order to qualify this part of the big kahuna. But the tzitz was merely a tachshit only. That's what it was. The Rebbe explained, the gather from big kahuna shall kohen gadol. The definition of the garments of the kahuna of the kohen gadol is with their posik zogt. Is as the posik states. Posik says, "Vasiso big day kodesh." So he says, make garments, holy garments, la'arin achicha, to your brother Aaron, l'chaved u'sifaris, for honor and beauty. Men kenes lernen if tzvei, I find we can learn this in two ways. Aleph, number one, ze zainen bi'ikram big day kodesh. Mainly, they are holy garments. It's really big day kodesh. That's what they are. Nor what kind we make them. They're such garments. They were made in a very beautiful and a very nice, a very special way. They were made. Funzov, techeles, gold, and the purple vargomon, purple wool, blue wool, and goimer v'sheish, and linen. So a mixture of all these. And also, so that's how they were constructed out of beautiful, and also the measure and the way they were shaped. They were like royalty, garments of royalty. Azoy, as a zainen lechovet l'siforis, in such a way that they become to honor and to beautify. That's the mainly garments, and we have beautiful garments. But the number two is based be ikram zainen ze zachen. Was they bring in kovet v'tiforos? Mainly, they are items that bring honor and beauty. That's the tachshitim. They're ornaments. They're jewelries. But the tachshitim, but these ornaments, not just bracelets, but b'tzuras begodim. They're made in the shape of begodim. Big they are in the they're garments. You made these jewelries, these honorable, these beautiful ornaments in the form of begodim. And according to this, there is a difference as is oich achiluk in the Seder Chashivas HaBegodim, that there is also a difference in the order of the importance of the garment, depending on what they do more. If it's more dress, the more important they are. If the more jewelry, the more important they are. In welchem van zee is mer, so there is more in which garment, which ones are more big day, which ones are more garment, and which one are more l'chavul sifaris. So basically, what the Rebbe is saying here is that every garment we have to look, what is this garment? Is it more just a garment and it's made for beauty? Or is the garment for beauty and we just wear it? If we accept as the first possibility, as beikrum zane ze begodim, that mainly their garments, not the begodim zane beifel kovel tiferes, but the garments are made for honor and beauty. Demos is their tzitz, so the tzitz was called kula is rabin tachshit. The tzitz, which is entirely, it's a type of a jewelry. It's not a garment at all. Is for the shmeina begodim, even though he's still one of the 8 garments that he has to wear, but nit in demselben Zug from Shar Big De Kahuna Shel Kohen Gadol. He's not in the same category as the other garments of the Kohen Gadol, because the other ones are clothing, and this is not clothing. If we learn that mainly they serve as jewelry, but they're just came out in garments, you dress them up, as we're saying in the second possibility. Then it turns out as that tzitz is in the Zalman Suk, that also the tzitz is in the same category because it's an ornament. We don't care that you also wear it or not, but lepoil mamish, it's an ornament. But adrab, the contrary, the tzitz being is an iker in them, so it's the main in the category of the garments because he is pure jewelry, pure takshit. But in ihm is der Inyan von takshit mehr wie in alle andere big dekora because in the tzitz, the idea of a takshit is more than in all other garments of Kohuna. So the Rebbe first brings down the idea that why the Pasuk doesn't mention the tzitz amongst the big Kahuna. And the Rebbe explains it because Rashi says by Choshet Takshit Keneged Alev. And the Rebbe explains that there's two possibilities. If the big Kahuna were mainly garments, but beautiful garments, or they were mainly ornaments, tachshitim, and they wore them. So that depends how we look at the tzitz. Is the tzitz on a lower, because it's not really a garment, so it may not be counted in it. Or is it mainly jewelry? Then we do count it. But if we don't count it because it's not really, so why do we count the choshen? So that's what the Rebbe explains. So when the Rashi says choshen, keneged alev, because at the end of the day, the tzitz is on the forehead, is b'chlal not connected to a garment. But the choshen, even though it's not really a garment, but it's keneged alev, it's the place where you wear garments, it's still counted as a beged. That is Rashi. That's how Rashi answers the question: why doesn't it count tzitz? Because the only reason we count choshen is because it's keneged alev. Because that makes it a stickle garment. Because according to Rashi, the main thing is a beged, and even though it sits is also one of the 8 begodim, but it's not part mamish, and we don't count it. Therefore, Rebbe explains. Look, based on this, we can say Ados is eine von the timing the Pirush Rashi if choshen tachshit keneged alev. This is one of the reasons. Rashi's commentary that tachshit is keneged alev. Well, der mit is musbar. This explains parvos the Torah rechon don nit tzitz. Why the Torah does not count tzitz here? Alpha p as choshen zog do the Torah. Even though Torah does say choshen. Der choshen choshen is a tachshit is a rober keneged alev. Even though it's a tachshit, but it's still against the heart. Vos is amokim. We mentioned two number godim. That's a place where people put on garments. The Rebbe verte nichla bepashtus in ve'elav godim. That's why it's simply included in elav godim. Mashenkin der tzitz vos mekoyma is. Where is the place of the tzitz? Aleph. Samto isay al psil techeles voyala mitznefes gomer. Either you put it over the hat and then it goes down base. Voyal metzachar, then it's on his forehead, on the hat and the forehead. That's not a place of garments. He says the posik nit kelim. That's where the posik doesn't include it. So after Rashi brings down the choshen, that it's an garment, Rashi brings down eifoi. B'hemshich l'zem, stellt sich Rashi oif ve'eifoi and explains what the ephod is. Ubehagdit Rashi hat schon früher in Parshas Truma gebracht. Rashi already said in the portion of Truma as choshen ve'ephod mefurashim beva'ata tetzaveh ve'hem minei tachshim. He said these are types of ornaments, the choshen and the ephod. And Rashi said they're explained in Ata Tetzaveh. So we already know that ephod, Rashi already said these are tachshitim. Was azoi is verstandig von Pashtus Aksum mit Parshas Seinu. Asai choshen und sei ephod seinen nit kein levushim regilim was mentioned trop. Those are not commonly worn garments that people wear, both the choshen and the ephod. They are Jew ornaments, as Rashi says there in Teruma. They are made for ornaments, for beauty, and for nice for honor and praise and to look for beauty. So if them is Rashi Machadish Parsha Seinu, so Rashi adds the Libi Oimerli, but it's my heart tells me Shu Chogur Loy Ma'achoidov that this is tied on the back. Roch B'Kerechav Gaf Ish, the width is the width of the back of a person. It means sinner. It's like an apron. Shekoidim Purtzint. Which the Sores gird themselves when they ride on the horses. This is the way it is done. So Rashi says. What does Rashi say? Rashi brings the Rayas from Sukkim Kinal. Even though Rashi brings evidence from verses, it still says Libe Oimerli, my heart. So the Rayas blois, they are only proof to show us of a Weisen Kilushoin Rashi, as Rashi says. What did he prove to us? Sha'efet Shem Levadi, the Ephod has its own name back. Seif is the shoulder pads. Shem Levadi, they have a name by themselves. Va'achoshev, the belt Shem Levad. As a Ephod Shem Tachshid Levadi. So basically, the Ephod is its own name. It's Ephod is Shem Tachshid Levadi. That is what the ephod is, but it's a tachshit. But from all of this, we have no idea that this has anything to do with a garment, with wearing it. From the alarayas, from all of these proofs, vosfara tachshit, that ephod is. What kind of an ornament is it? What kind of a jewelry is it? From Pashas Psukim, and from the simple meaning of the verses, was der Choshev ephod kumen alamol zusammen. The Chosh and Ephod always come together. When seine kosher you tie them one to another. Both make you can't learn, so you would be able to learn that this is not a tachshit kenegen amokim mesuyim beguf. That this is a ornament, a tachshit, which is corresponds, it's opposite a certain part of the body, just as the Choshen is opposite the leib. Punkt azay vider Choshen is tachshit keneged a leib. The Choshen is an ornament opposite the heart. This is an ephod opposite a certain specific part of the body. Rashi. So that part Rashi says that it's not just an ornament, but it's also a garment. The libi oimerli shu chogur loy ma'achoyrav kimin sinar. My heart tells me that it's tied from the back like an apron. Shechogres hasoris ksherech v'sal hasusim. That the soris, the women officers, gird when they ride on the horses. This is a tachshit nit nor keneged amokim besuim beguf. This isn't a tachshit only corresponding to a certain area in the body, but a tachshit lenoi v'yofi. This is a tachshit for beauty, and was dint als levush mamish. This is actually a garment. Kimin sinner. That's the chiddush. That's libi oimerli. That this is actually like an apron. This is something more than just a jewelry. By lidas Rashi b'pshuta shel mikra. And Rashi is view in the simple meaning of the pasuk. When the Torah zogt vosiso bigdei kodesh, the Torah says make bigdei kodesh la'ar nechichel chovel luciferus to your brother Aaron for beauty and honor. The eil habgodim, it says these are the garments bgodim ashiyasu. Unis the noch mashmid them tzitz and doesn't count the tzitz. Darf man lernen, we should learn at dozainen beikram begodim levushim, that really they're garments. They're really levushim, you wear them. Nor the begodim zainen beoifenu bitsura, but these garments are in such a way, and a shape was is lekovet usiforis, which is for honor and beauty. And vitachshitim. Similar to tachshitim, these garments are similar to tachshitim, but they're garments. Und der Pfarrer ist benegei jeden Beget von the Bigdei Kahuna. But with regards to each garment of the Bigdei Kahuna, kleibt Rashi oizu madgish b'lishoinoi. So Rashi chooses and emphasizes his language to learn as kol echad mehem is a levush, that each one of them is an actual garment. Well, derech ze beneged of Choshen, when the root on Tachshit, Rashi refers to Tachshit, is Rashi mefarish genau. So Rashi explains like above, as Afa Pikeno Tarashayich is together from Godim. Tachshit connected Alev. It's still connected to garments because it's Tachshit connected Alev. So in Rashi's take on it, the Pshutish Mikra, that the ephod needs to be a garment better, a real garment, a garment that is used. And this also explains to us a used garment. Rashi explains in his Loshen, Rashi wants to say this is really a garment, not a tachshit, because the fact that the Torah doesn't count tzitz and does count the other means that these are really begodim. By Choshen, he has to say it's connected alev, but over here he says yirali, it's a real full garment. Now, Rashi wants to explain that the soris they use it when they're riding to tell them it's actually a garment, because when they're riding and they're more exposed because they're on the horse or whatever, the donkey, they need extra garment. That's a garment that they wear. Hey, Rashi, we also understand why Rashi has to add these are when the soris gird them when they ride on the horses. The Lechayre was gitas zu in der Hasbara from the Mephid. What does this add explanation about the Ephod, the way that they write? Bald as der Zokchenkim in Sinner, he says already, it's like an apron, und dem las shekoidim purtzit. And he already says the Loshen Amzu, how it's in the French. By a person, Verstatement Shem was to see, so we know what it is. Nor their meat. So what does Rashi have to add that they write the stories when they write it? Nor their meat, macht Rashi klor dem geder und dem tamalavush. With this, Rashi clarifies the definition and the reason for this garment. Aleph Rashi shechoigris hasoris. This is a girded by the officer. This means this is an important garment. This is a special garment of greatness. Nita levush was not mentioned trogen. It's not a garment that ordinary people wear. Ubemele is dos abeget welche is lekovet luciferus. It's therefore a garment which is for honor and beauty. Umehemshech zu choishen abeget shel malchus, and continuation of the choishen, which is a garment of royalty. And the Rebbe quotes in the Order 36 the various different Rashis in which you see Rashi is trying to point out how all these garments are royal garments, they're specialty garments. And then the second part of Sherech V'Salah Susim, it's important to tell us, was Damul Trogen Sores Merer Levushim. Then they wear more garments, Al Sneis Yiseda, for extra modesty. V'Hovchoy Batachshitim. It's just the opposite. At that point, they don't wear all their ornament, the jewelry. Most of the time, when do you wear jewelry? Not when you're riding the horse, but the time is to show, as quoting from the Megillah, to show the nations and the officers her beauty of Vashti over there. The pasuk says, so that's when you want to show off, and not when you're riding. So this tells us that when they're riding, it's not a garment, it's not a ornament only, it's a garment. Derech Zeh is moving the gabe the Kohen Gadol. Similarly, it's understood with regard to the Kohen Gadol. This is not stam, it's not just an additional jewelry that he puts on, or a tachshit was is in suk shalavush. It's a jewelry which is in the category of a garment. And those is als atznis he said about them Kohen Gadol. It makes additional modesty by the Kohen Gadol. It's a garment that he wears for additional modesty for a Kohen Gadol. Aderech v'shen let him freer, similar to what we already learned earlier. Shouldn't wake steps when going up to the Mizbeach, so that your erva should not be revealed. So wants to make it a ramp, not too big step, as mitzader kedusha for the Avnei Mizbeach, because of the sanctity of the stones of the Mizbeach. When it getort arev game the milus, you were not allowed, or you weren't permitted to go up with steps. even though they already were wearing pants, and still didn't want it to be visible over the, not going by steps, only on a ramp. Similar, it's understood as it relates to the Kohen Gadol. As Sulib Zayin Kedusha Yisoida, that because of his additional holiness, sanctity, Seder needed the extra tznius. So the Rebbe learns that Rashi learns that this is all like a garment. And Rashi adds it's like the officers, women, saris that they wear so that you can see it's a beautiful garment, like all the garments, but it's also a garment that you wear for additional tznius, and that's the reason also why the Kohen Gadol wore. So that's Rashi's view. But Das Rambam over says the Rebbe Vov, he learns that they were mainly jewelry. Zayin the big dissolve shel Kohen Gadol, those golden garments of the Kohen Gadol, be ikram, mainly nit azoy, not so much in the gather from the Godim, not so much in the category, in the defined as garments, but we get them tachshitim, but they're really ornaments. They move them from the ksuvim as understood from the verses as their tzitz, choishen, eifod, the meil, seine nitkin ba'godem regilim. The tzitz, choishen, eifod, the meals that are not usual garments, was the far. When the Rambam is mefarish dem oifen asiyas big day kuhuna, when the Rambam explains the way they made the big day kuhuna, fangt on mit dem tzitz. He starts with the tzitz, while ikram shall big day kohen gadol. The main of the garments of the kohen gadol als kovet luciferus, for honor and beauty, is in them was his item yichodim al tachshitim. It's the far that designated, and they're unique because they're ornaments, they're jewelries. That was at first and foremost at the tzitz. The tzitz was only tachshit. The Rambam also learns so by the Eifed. This is verstanding from Teuchen HaKsuvim, as understood from the content of the verses, as is in Ageder from Atachshit Miyuchad, that this is defined as a designated ornament for the Kohen Gadol. Al derech ubehemshach to them choshim was is given Atachshit Miyuchad, and along the lines, and as a continuation to the choshen, which was a specific ornament. So Kendo the Rambam did Zogman B'Yiruli Kiyetzuba, it seems to me like he has to. This is not unique. This is verstandig from Pashto Ksum. This is simple in the meaning of the verses. But this was what the Ephod was. The Ephod was part of the, like the Choshen, like everything else that was jewelry here. So he doesn't have to say. So why do they differ at the length and the width of it? So the Rebbe explains along this line in Zion that this also makes a difference between the interpretation, the measurements, the way Rashi says, and the Rambam. Pianal Zion. Is move on the Shinutz Vishan Rashi mit Rambam in the Midas Levusha Evid, the difference between Rashi and the Rambam in the measure and the garment of Evid. The Das Rashi, according to Rashi's opinion, the Bald Ados is Beiker, a levush, unzulib tznius, he said from the Kohen Gadol. It's mainly a garment and meant for additional modesty of the Kohen Gadol. Learn Rashi. The Rashi says, as Allah fangt zichon mimosnov u'lamato, mimosnov u'lamato matzilu. It starts from his hip, which is below his elbows, nit l'maylo, not above it. Because dort isn't shaykh tznius. You say to Macharev, there's no additional modesty above the hip is not more modesty. Starting from the hip is the sufficient. Base is magia adakebov. Tzulib tznius has to go all the way till the heels because of tznius. Says kimidas rocha gaba shel odom v'yeser, and Rashi says it's like the measure of the back of a person and more. Nikpal hasina lefnei hakohen al mosnav, that the sinner folded over in front of the kohen on his hip, uktzas kreisim mekan mekan, and a little bit of the stomach from here and here. Was brengt arois noch mer vidos is alavusha of them kohen. This expresses even more. Oh, this is a garment for the kohen. But the Das Rambam is Sefer Hayat. According to the Rambam's view of Sefer Hayat, that this is Ikar HaTachshit, that it's mainly an ornament and jewelry. Is Nitoke Tam L'Chadish De Protiva now. There's no reason to come up with these novel details, or Befrat B'Shuta Shel Mikra, especially in the simple meaning of the pasuk, as is given Ada Kevov. So not B'Shuta, so that's why it's Libi Omerli. This is given Ada Kevov, Ungresser from Gabish Lodom, that it's larger than the back, the person that is Zok, the Rechav Kirechav Gabish Lodom. Its width is as the width of the back of a person, the Kosov, from shoulder to shoulder, and the length is from behind the elbows of the person, from his back until the feet. Why from Atzila Yadayim not lower? And those of the Rambam learned as V'orka Mekeneged Atzila Yadayim Nitlamata Atzila V'Las Rashi. Why only from the elbows, not lower? Well, the Das Rambam is der Eifet V'Chesh Nit Kein Legamri. They're not entirely two separate ornaments. They're stellen zusammen ein Tachshit Shalom, together one Tachshit Shalom. Shem Vidosi is in them Shimush von Choshen Be'efod. Just as the use, how did we use the Choshen Be'efod? Ados was Mishoel Be'urim V'tumim, that you ask in the Urim V'tumim, and the Kohen answered, and the Kohen responds, Beruch HaKodesh, is just not in the Choshen, it's not just in the Choshen, but it's also the Eifod. Because Shena Rambam, as the Rambam says the language, Mailis Kohen Godul Shemedaber Al Pi HaEfed VaHaChoshen Beruch HaKodesh, that he speaks based on the Eifed and the Ched Beruch HaKodesh. Al Derech Zeh is Geder HaTachshit Shobehem. So similarly is the definition of the jewelry, the Tachshit, which is in the as a beide stellen zusammen ein schlemes dicken Tachshit, that they together, the Eifed and the Choshen together, put together one whole Tachshit. So, according to the Rambam's Bepashtus, the Choshen Eifed, they were used together. That's how they responded. So they're one. They're really one thing together. On the Riber Hal the Rambam, that's where the Rambam's view is, as the Eifed darf sich onheben nicht lemata matziliyodem, not below the elbows of the hand, noch dem ves endigt sich der Choshen, which would be after the Choshen ended, Bili das Rashi, as according to Rashi, that it goes below, nor mikeneged atzila yadayim, opposite by the elbows, in them ord wo sie gefindt sich dem Choshen, that's the spot where there is the Choshen by the elbows, and that's where the Eifed begins. So the Rashi learns that it's a garment, and the garment you need from Mosnov, that's where the sneeze begins. So you need from below the elbows. But the Rambam learns it's a jewelry and it's part of the Choshen. So you start where the Choshen ends, not lower than that. It's precise the Rambam's language. Und in seinem Madgish sein Kesher ha'Eifed v'Choshen, and his emphasizing the connection between the Eifed and the Choshen, nimtzo. It turns out, he says the Rambam, quoting the Rambam, Ksheloivesh ha'Eifed v'Choshen, when he wears, puts on the Eifed and the Choshen, Yia Choshen al libay b'shoveh, the Choshen will be on his heart straight, and the Eifed from the back, the Cheshev Eifed Koshur al liboy tachas HaChoshen, and the string of the Eifed is tied on the heart beneath the Choshen. Thus is ein Tachshit Levushi, combines them together. This is one ornament, one garment, Sholem. It's put together from the Choshen, was his milfonav al liboy, from the Choshen which is in front of him on his heart. That's where the Choshen is, and that's from the Eifed was his machoidav, and from the Eifed that is in his back, and through which he tied the Eifed, as the Rambam says. So this is the differences. How the Rebbe explains that according to the Rambam, it's an ornament and it's part of the choshen, and therefore it belongs Batzile Yodov, so that the string will be opposite his heart, would be around the heart, which is where the choshen is. It explains also why Rashi says it folds around and it goes to the field, because to Rashi it's a garment. It's an idea of tznius, and in order to accomplish the idea of tznius, you need to have it even more, as Rashi details, all the ways to the feet, around his hip and around his stomach, and that is why it's a garment. Now, in Oisches, the Rebbe continues to say, based on the above, we'll also understand exactly when the belt of the ephod was tied. Was it tied according to the Rambam? It seems like the tying of the ephod took place after the choshen. In the psukim, as the Ramban, the Rebbe brings down, points out, the way it sounds like first they put on the ephod and they tied the ephod. The Rebbe explains that's according to the Ramban and Rashi, in which the ephod is its own garment and the choshen is its own garment. So you finish the ephod, you tie it, and then you get to the choshen. But the Rambam writes, no, that you put on the choshen and then you tie the ephod on the choshen, because to the Rambam they're all one garment. Let's look inside. Ches. Pianal yesh levayer kaba protidinim in Rambam. Based on the above, we can explain some detailed dinim in the Rambam. In the Seder Levishas Habegodim, Zog the Rambam. In the order, the way they put on the garments, the Rambam says, Koyin Godel Achar Shechoiger Be'avneit Loivesh Hamil. The Koyin Godel, after he girded himself with the Avneit, the Rambam says, the Avneit that you put on in the beginning, you put on the Kesoinus and you put on the Avneit. Then he says, Loivish Hami'il, you put on the Me'il. And then Ba'al Hami'il, on top of the Me'il, you put on her Ephod. And then Ba'choshen, and you put also on the Choshen. And then V'choiger B'cheshev ha'Ephod Al Hami'il Metachas HaChoshen. After the Choshen was on already, you tie with the string of the rope, the belt of the ephod, on top of the me'il and below the choshen. So it seems that you first put on the choshen and then you tie the ephod. From Loshna Rambam is mashma. From the language of the Rambam is mashma, as the chagira b'cheishev ephod, that the girding, the tying, the belt with the string of the ephod, with the belt of the ephod, is getan geworden, was done noch dem Antom von dem choshen, after putting on the choshen. In the psukim, it looks like different than when it says you make it and when they actually did it. Baksuvim is them in them doashinu. In the psukim, there is a change. In them onzog beparsha seinu, in the command in our parsha state, they say that hahal bosha, the order, the way they dressed it. In our parsha, it says ve'esa ephod, ve'esa choshen. So first says the ephod the choshen, seeming like the Rambam. And the nochva fadeto lebecheshev ephod. So it comes out that the tying the ephod was after the choshen was put up. But in Parshas Sav, is there Seder al-Bosha B'Poel over there, when it talks about in them Seder al-Bosha B'Poel, how they actually put on the garments. State over there, it says Vayitein Olav Es HaEphod. You put the ephod, Vayachger Oisu B'Cheshev HaEphod. Before putting on the choshen, it says you tied it with the belt of the ephod, with the string of the ephod. Vayefod Loi Boy, and he girded him with it, with the ephod. When there noch steht v'yosem olav es hachoshen, then it says you put on that he put on him the choshen. That's the way it was done. So over here in this pasuk, it says clearly that you put the choshen on after you put the belt of the ephod on. So the Ramban places himself and he says, over here he says first that he put the belt of the ephod before putting on the choshen. Ki Moshe yoda b'derech halavisha, because Moshe knew the way you get dressed. Ki la'olam habegodim, that when you put on garments, you tie them after you put them on. You don't interrupt putting on something else and then go tie it on. Ki la'olam habegodim, take of the levishas habeged, yarger oisa b'chagura asoyloi. Then you would put on the garment, then you tie it with the belt that is made for that belt. The avneit, take of the katoinis. As soon as you put on the shirt, you put on the avnei, the belt for it, the gartel for the katoinis. Ubecheshev, take of levid. You put on the cheshev as soon as you put on the ephod. Vein roishe tia levishes ha'ephod b'avsokas. It's not fitting that the ephod should be put on interruption. You put on the ephod, then you put on the cheshev, and then you finish with tying the ephod. However, the Ramban says, "I will show them before it says ve'esra ephod." Comes out that you make the ephod and the choshen and that the belt is after the choshen was on, is the because he wasn't going in the length of the choshen, so he said ephod and the choshen together, and then he talks about the ephod. That's the way it says in the Ramban, but for Rambam is over moving kinal, but from the Rambam we see like before, as the chagira b'cheshev ha'ephod is given la'achre levishen that the tying with the rope of the ephod, the tie of the ephod, took place after putting on the chesed. So now, based on the above, the purpose of the ephod, on whether the ephod and the chesed are one or this different, we can explain the difference between the Ramban and the Rambam, that the Ramban goes like Rashi. Yes, Loimer, as the Ramban gave Shitas Rashi, as the Choshen, the Eifet goes Rashi with the Choshen, it's Svei Bazundere Gedorim. In Big Day Kohen Gadol, there are two separate definitions of the garments of Kohen Gadol. But the Riber Hal the Rambam, therefore the Rambam's view is as frier verbindet man the Eifet. First, you tie the Eifet. Vayachgir Oisei B'cheshev Eifet. Finish the job of the ephod, the first garment, you tie it with the string of the ephod. Als gemar for the vicious ephod, that ends the putting on the ephod. And then noch, by Yosem all of us and then you put the chesed on. Separate. She'enkel das Rambam, as opposed to the Prim Rambam. Afal pi was chesed the ephod seine zwei begodim in the cheshbon shel shmeine big dekuna. Although it's not one garment. Choshen and ephod are two separate garments when we count the 8 garments of the kuna. But together they make up one dressing, one ornament. But Rambam Lishitose, Rambam goes according to his view earlier, as the Choshen the ephod darfa zayin vukim zeluzeh, that the ephod and the choshen need to be connected one to another. Choshen cannot move from the ephod. One who moves the choshen the ephod, and he would take apart that connection in a way of rooting it against Malchus. That's not only when is doing the work, the service in the Beis Hamikdash, but it's always when the service of the Kohen Gadol. The andere halten, as others say, but this is even not in the time of Avodah. Why? This is a law in the Beged itself. But the Choshen, the Eifed, darfen sein Dvukim Zabozo nicht abgeteilt. But the Choshen and Eifed need to be connected. They're not separate because they're really one Tachshit and one Levush. And that's why you can never separate them. How the Rambam, so therefore the Rambam says that tying the ephod after putting on the chesed is not interruption. How the Rambam does his ein halbosha. This is one dressing up. Ve'al ha'me'il tut menon ha'efed v'achoshen. You to put on the efed choshen. Ein levush, it's like one garment. Und then noch v'choger v'cheshev v'efed. And then the choger v'cheshev v'efed. It's not a separate efed that you choger before, but you do it after. But this is the gemar, nit nor from ha'boshas ha'efed. This is not just the end of the putting on the efed. This is actually completing the choshen, because the choshen and efed go together. So you're not interrupting, but this is the end. You put on the efed together with the choshen one, and then you tie it, and that's the way is the gemar of the choshen and efed, because these are together. That's the view of the Rambam. Versus Rashi holds that it's two separate garments. So therefore, to finish, as the Ramban explains, first to finish the ephod and put the belt on, and then you go for the chesed. Test from them Pirush Rashi nimmt man arois ayro niflo in avodas Hashem. From this Rashi, we take out a tremendous lesson in the service of Hashem. So as you do a Todas Baal Shem Tov, it's known the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. As yede zach vosayid zetor leher. Anything a yid that he sees or he hears is das ayro avodas adam lekoina. It's a lesson in the service of man to his creator, to Hashem. And this is simply understood that you need to lesson. Baldas kol mashabora kodesh baruch hu ba'ilomei. Since everything Hashem created in his world, he did not even create one thing in vain. And therefore, why did you see this thing? Why? It means that there's a lesson. And those was the Eibishter, but Gefir, the fact that Hashem led. As there Idzos endi miure in Velda, this Yid should see this happening in the world, is move on. It's understood that this is not This is not in vain, God forbid. Nor to live a tachlis. There's a goal, there's a purpose. Was the tachlis? So what is the goal? Hashem showed it of a purpose. That's understood. Everything is for a purpose. And what's the purpose? Is the fact that we were created to serve Hashem. So in essence, it means that what the Baal Shem said, that everything that we see and hear is a lesson in the service of Hashem. As you do the Sipur was Melamdim der Zehlen the Kinder, it's known, the story, that the teachers tell the children in Cheder, when they go to Cheder, learning them Pirush Rashi, when they learn the Rashi, as it relates to the apron, it says, Kimin Siner Shechayres Hasores Ksherechvis al Hasusim. It's a kind of an apron that the women's saris wear. They gird them when they're riding on the horses. Afal Pi, Bosurev Rubam from the Talmidim, the majority of the students, especially 5-year-olds that learn in Chumash, came on the Gizen, they never saw it. So what did the Melamdim teach the children? As Amol Rashi gained the Kingas. One time when Rashi was going in the street, Gizen, the Asura is Rechepes Alasus. Saw that Asura was riding on a horse. Ongitor in Asina. She was dressed in Asina. When the Rashi had Tzir bit started given from them, and Rashi was in a lot of pain of this. Why was shown something like this from above? Then when he was writing his commentary on the Torah, and it was explaining the Eifed, he calmed down. He relaxed. He learned a lesson in his service to Hashem through his commentary on the Torah. It explained him how the Eifed work. So that is also explaining why Menotim does Babvisen to show him to understand better the act of the Eifed. From them that he actually learned from this. This gave him the idea as it's not just an ornament. Jewelry. This is mashma l'chayda from Teichen Aksuvim, as it seems like from the psuk himself. No, she's begeder levush, but this is actually a garment. Kinal barucha, like before. This is a hero. This Rashi learned from this something to better interpret a pasuk, not just to explain it, but to explain that this is not an ornament, but this is an actual levush. So this is what Rashi is telling you about Chomesh Mikra. As yet the Zach Bosaid had the Zed. Even though he doesn't know what the Soros Rechvis are, but everything that a Yid hears or sees, Bedugma Zed, Soros Rechvis al Susim, similar to seeing the Soros riding on the horses, is the Snor to Libzain Limud Atoyra Vikim Mitzvahs. It's only for his study of Torah and observance of mitzvahs. Yud. So based on this, we can explain in the inner matter of things. Rashi says, Libi Oimerli starts off. Then he continues, my heart tells me. Further, my heart tells me. Rashi uses the Lashon, Libi, my heart. Nidvi Lashon Rashi. Not as the common language of Rashi, in many places in his commentary, also this words, Vani Oimer creates, and I say, the Inyan Hanal was Rashi Gizen, the above matter that Rashi saw, is not gleich zu all inyonim shebe'olam. It's not the same, equal to all matters of the world. Was Ayid Zet or the head, even the head that shows that Ayid hears or sees permissible things. That he needs to learn a lesson with Hashem. This is a matter that a Yid needs to refrain from seeing. The Gemara says as Be'isha Kodrei Meishav Nit Merkov. And the Torah talks about a woman, it says sitting and not riding, because riding represents a non-sneezdika way. Is there koyach as oich von azama uras al tzukum and avidus Hashem? So the power that even such a happening, which seems to be a negative, seeing a woman riding, zol tzukum and avidus Hashem, und noch mehr, does almost sein nabona vasagas ha'torah, more that this should add in the understanding and the grasp of Torah. Torah is farbunu mit leib. That's libi emerli. Yechida shabenefesh, the nekudas hayadus. That's the point of Judaism that every Yid has equally. That mainly rests not in the mind or believe in the heart. And that level of Yechidah, there is no block, no obscurity from no matter of the world. Even from items that are not according to the Torah. The Adrab. Also the power, so to turn sins intentional to merits, comes the Chiddush, which is not. And the river is the Afke Mitzad Bechinas Libi, specifically Libi Aimer, statement of Mentut Bepoil, you understand, you do actually, when there's that, as Eich does was Met Gizen Shalebir say, also that which is seen, not willingly, Hepech Ritzoinei, opposite that he wants. Soror Recheves Alasus, a soror riding on a horse, Muz und darf sich mitzteier sein of them, so he needs to, and he has to pain himself over this. Bis as vet euch furaria ba'almo bar korche, to the extent that even from just seeing and against this whole kumen, ki yisren ha'oivren ha'choshech, like the advantage of life over darkness, so yisren ba'kodesh, to advantage in holiness, bis till v'alderech bin medan, in our case, as come to a pirish in Maisa Eifed, we added an explanation, the way the Eifed was made, a big day Kohen Godel, from the garments of the Kohen Godel, that you make al yidei covered is for the honor and beauty. So the sighting that Rashi saw was a negative, was against his will, he didn't want it, but yet he saw it So he turned around because of the leiv, because of the yechida. He was able to turn around and bring it into an interpretation, an upshat and Torah, that these are not just jewelry, but they're actually garments sefaris. B'siches Motzei Shabbos Parshas Tetzaveh Tovshin Lamed Vov and Tovshin Lamed Tes.